Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to lesson 1 of understanding the High Holidays prayer book. This is a sequel to our previous course, if you will, understanding the prayer book. And this one is specific towards the high holidays. You know, they tell a story. Yitzchak. They say that there was a little boy. We'll call him Sam. He was going with his grandfather to services on Rosh Hashana. And his grandfather is showing him around the synagogue. He's showing him what's in the beautiful foyer of the synagogue. And over there they have a memorial for the Jewish soldiers. So the boy is asking, and what's this, Grandpa? He says, this is for the men that died in the service. So the boy says, was it the Rosh Hashana service or the Yom Kippur service? So sometimes some people may feel a little bit that way, sitting in the Rosh Hashana services or the Yom Kippur services, the high holiday services. And when we are prepared by knowing a little bit what to expect, so it lightens the burden a little bit. It lightens the load because we're more prepared and we're able to follow along then a little bit easier, I would hope. And so that means that anyone that's here today is concerned about that and wants to be able to follow along easier in the services. Now, we could take a whole history lesson and say how it came about that the services have become what they've become today. Going back to the late 1800s, late 1700s, 1800s, early 1900s in Europe, where this concept of services becoming almost like a concert, and then that spilling over to the early, the earlier years in the United States. If you take a look at the Sephardi service, it looks very different. They don't pray the way the Ashkenazim pray. Have you ever been to a Sephardi service? The Chazan stands there, and he sings, and everyone sings along with him. And it's like one big kumbaya, the prayer. It's actually really beautiful. Obviously, the Ashkenazi tradition is very different, where you have a Chazan leading the service. But I don't think it was ever meant to be that a Chazan leading the service is meant to be a Chazan doing a concert with a choir. That perhaps was adapted from other cultures and backgrounds, but the idea is that coming to the prayers means that we should be part of the prayers. Everyone there is coming to pray. You're not coming to just watch a concert taking place. Now, of course, you do have to have a chazan. You have to have someone that knows how to sing, that knows how to sing nicely, because you do want it to be an enjoyable service. It's not meant to be a annoying or devastating event. It should be something that's enjoyable. And if someone is sitting and saying, looking at their clock, saying, "When can I get out of here already?" So that's also not good. Regardless, we have a great exodus. You know what the great exodus is?
Yeah. Right after the sermon by the Rebbe.
That's right. Right after Yizkor, there's a great exodus on Yom Kippur.
That's true.
Right? About 3/4 of the crowd empties out. Now, I actually enjoy that part of Yom Kippur. I could feel the air conditioner again. It's, Crowd is smaller, it's less pressure. Anyway, so what you have over here, this is called a machzor. Machzor. A machzor is actually a very similar word to siddur. What does the word siddur mean? Siddur is translated as prayer book, but that's not actually what the word siddur means. You know what the word siddur means? What? What do you say? Order. That's right. Oh, who said order? You said order? The word siddur means order, like a seder, like a Pesach seder. What does a Pesach seder mean? It means the Pesach order, the 15 things, the order. A siddur means an order. And that's because a siddur has an order. It's not just something, it's not just a bunch of prayers globbered together and say whatever it is. There's an order, there's a setup, and there's a way that things are meant to be. And those of you who came to the previous course, we went through in detail of what the order of the siddur is. The machzor, the word machzor means a cycle. And it's the order which is at the cycle of the new year. When the cycle of the new year regenerates itself, then we refer back to the machzor. Some people have a machzor for other holidays as well. The machzor just means the cycle. But again, it's the idea that we're going in an order, we're doing something in a certain fashion, in a certain setup order. Now, when we understand that, it makes it a little bit easier to follow what the actual prayers are. For discussion's sake, I'm going to begin with the morning service because the evening service is almost very, very similar to any other day of the week or Shabbos. Actually, this year it's on Shabbos, so it's going to be a little bit more Shabbos-like. We had a few of the Shabbos prayers in there. But let's take a look at the morning prayer. Those who come here on a regular Shabbos morning begin on page 79, Hodu. Page 79 is where we begin for those who come in the morning, those who are here at 10 o'clock early in the morning. 10 o'clock early. 10 o'clock for here is early. But if you go through here, you'll notice that basically it looks almost verbatim like a Shabbos prayer, which is what it is. It is basically word for word like a Shabbos prayer, with the exception of one word, with the exception of one paragraph and one word. So I'm not going to go through the whole Shabbos prayer. We did that in the past. I'm just going to take a look at one page 99. Page 99 is at the end of what we know as Nishmas, right? And Shabbos say Nishmas, Kol Chai, Tevarech Shimcha, right? So at the end of that, so you see in the middle of page 99, there's a word that is bolded there. What is the word? Hamelech, right? Why is the word Hamelech bolded? The king. Now normally during the year, we say Hamelech Yoshev, Hamelech HaYoshev Al Kisei Ram V'Nisa, the king who sits on his lofty and sublime throne. Hamelech HaYoshev. On Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur, the letter Hey, which means who normally sits, is removed, to tell you that Hamelech Yoshev, that the king is currently sitting. Rosh Hashana is the day of judgment. Rosh Hashana is the day that we crown the king. And so we say Hamelech Yoshev. And during this time, the Chazan does a whole song, and there's a whole traditional tune. The Hamelech Yoshev Al Kisei Ram V'Nisa. And then there's a whole tune that follows that. It's interesting.
What does Shachar mean actually?
Shachar means morning. The word Shachar means morning. Shachar means morning. there aren't a lot of things that are discussed as a story or a background of prayers, but this particular prayer does have a background. It says it is quoted in the machzorim that on one occasion when Rav Aaron Karlin, of blessed memory, one of the eminent disciples of the Maggid of Mezrich, of blessed memory, began to recite Hamelech, he fell into a deep faint. When later asked the cause of this, he replied that he reflected upon the statement in the Talmud Gittin, "If I am a king, why did you not come before?" If the holy Rav Aaron felt so, how should we feel? And what this is referring to a story in the Talmud tractate of Gittin, which was during the time of, shortly before the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was then the leader of the Jewish people at the time, he was dealing with battles on many fronts that the Jewish people were going on. First of all, there was the Romans who had surrounded the city of Jerusalem. And aside from that, there was an internal battle going on with the Jewish people, essentially a civil war of how to deal with the situation, because they are now locked in to the city of Jerusalem, and there's a lot of internal fighting going on. So without going to all the details, he had to sneak his way out of the city, and the only way to get out of the city was, there's only one way out. You know what's the one way out of the city? If you're dead. That's the only way to get out of the city. So, because you're not allowed to bury inside the walls of Jerusalem. So he actually faked his death. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai actually faked his death, and he was carried out in a coffin. And the reason that he did this was because he wanted to try and appease the Romans. When he came out, the Roman general who was there, he referred to him as a king, and he said, "Your Majesty," or whatever. And obviously this was a big rabbi, and the Roman general was very honored to meet him. And his response was, "If I am a king, then you should have come to me earlier. Why are you coming to me now? And if I'm not a king, your head should be chopped off, because how dare you refer to a general as a king?" Anyway, at that very moment, they came and broke the news to him that the Caesar had just died and that he was going to be crowned the new Caesar, the new king. That's the story. And then he explained that the reason I didn't come until now was because I wasn't allowed out, and I had to literally sneak my way out of the city. So he referenced this, and he says, Hamelech, we're saying the king, and he said, we're coming to God as a king, and God is saying to us, like, why didn't you come to me till now? And we have to explain that we have internal struggles that's not allowing us to come until now, right? God, we want to come, God, but there's things holding us back. But finally it comes, Rosh Hashana, Yom Kippur. All right, we had to sneak out. We had to get out in the coffin, whatever it is. We managed to get our way to shul. We had to sneak in, even though they were collecting tickets and they wouldn't let us in, and we didn't want to pay. We finally got into synagogue, and here I am, God. Right? So this is what he was referencing. So I just wanted to point that out. Then just one more thing. On page 100, right after we say the Yishtabach prayer, again, this is all Shabbos, so I'm not going to spend much time on it, but there is one paragraph that we add, which is said the entire 10 days between Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur, and that is Psalm 130. And it talks about a song of ascent. Out of the depths I call to you, O Lord. My Lord, hearken to my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my pleas. In other words, we're turning to God and saying, God, please listen to our prayers. So it's this is a special prayer which is recited at this point from Rosh Hashana until Yom Kippur every single day. Now the rest I'm going to leave it. It's the same as any regular Shabbos, and it's just I don't have the time to go through the detail because we have a lot to cover. Now, where it really gets different is when it comes to what we call the Shemona Esrei, or the Amidah prayer, which begins on page 109. Now, for those who were here in the previous class, so we explained that how many blessings are there in the original instituted prayer? How many blessings were there? No?
60.
No. My gosh, who's your teacher? 18, right? Shemona Esrei means 18. Thank you. Now, huh?
Now it's 19.
Now it's 19. That's right. Okay, good. Thank you, Monica. Now they won't fire me. There's 18 blessings, and then there was another one added, which is 19. Okay? That's known as the Shemona Esrei. Now, we explained that the first three and the last three are always said, regardless of the day or the holiday. You always have the first three that are said, the last three. The first one is Magen Avraham, which is known as the blessing of the forefathers, shield of Abraham, the blessing of the forefathers. The second one is the blessing of Mechaya HaMesim, the blessing which is about the resurrection. And the third blessing is Ata Kadosh V'Shimcha Kadosh, the blessing of holiness. Right? Baruch Atah Hashem, Hakel HaKadosh, blessed you God, the Holy King. The last three is the blessings of thanks, Modim Anachnu Lach, right? We say Modim, thanks. And then we bless for peace, also Baruch Atah Hashem, we bless for peace, Shalom, right? The blessing for peace. So those are the last three. And then we also say Ritzei, which is about the sacrifices. The middle 18 blessings, the other ones, the other 12 or 13 are not recited on Shabbos or Yantif, right? Those are not recited. Why? Why don't we recite them on Shabbos or Yantif? Because because they're asking God for our needs, and we don't ask for our needs on Shabbos. Shabbos is a day of rest. We don't want to focus on all the things that we're missing in life. We want to focus on enjoying life. And so we don't say those middle blessings. Now, depending on the holiday, depending on Shabbos and Yantif, we're always going to add in something relevant to that Shabbos or the holiday, what it is. And so there's always going to be one blessing. So then we have 3 in the beginning, 3 in the end, and 1 in the middle. How many is that? 7. Very good. So we have 7 blessings on every Shabbos and Yantif. The exception to this is Rosh Hashana. Rosh Hashana is the only holiday, and by the way, that includes Yom Kippur also not, the only holiday which there is added blessings in the middle. That is only, however, in Musaf. Right? There's 2 prayers that we say. There's the Shacharis prayer, which is the morning prayer, which as we said, represents the morning sacrifice that was brought. And then we have the Musaf prayer, which represents the additional sacrifice that was brought on holidays, which is recited on holidays. Now, the Shacharis prayer, a lot of it is very similar as well. There's also a blessing that is added in the middle, 1 blessing in the middle. And when I say Shacharis, this also includes Ma'ariv, the evening prayer, as well as Mincha, the afternoon prayer. However, on Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur, what is different than any other holiday is that the first 3 and the last 3, they don't change the blessings, but there are additions to those blessings. So as opposed to any other holiday where the first 3 and last 3 are always going to be the same across the board, no matter what day of the week, no matter what day of the year, on Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur, there are additions to those prayers, and then a few small changes as we will look at. So let's take a look at page 109. The first thing is, in the first blessing of the Amidah prayer, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avraham. There is an added paragraph, an added sentence before that. What does it say? Zachreinu l'chaim, melech hafetz b'chaim, v'chasveinu b'sefer ha'chaim, l'mancha elokim chaim. What does that mean? Remember us for life, King who desires life, inscribe us in the book of life for your sake, O living God. Why do we ask that here? Why do we ask to be inscribed in the book of life here? Because we're mentioning Avraham, mentioning our forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, our forefathers. And so a lot of the prayers during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur invoke our forefathers and mothers, by the way. A lot of the prayers include mothers. The Haftarah of Rosh Hashanah, as we'll see, is from some of the great women in history. And Rosh Hashanah is a day of judgment, and so we want to invoke that. We have to play all our cards, as they say. So we have to do what we can to try and get by. And so when we're mentioning Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, we say, by the way, God, Zachreinu l'chaim, remember us also in the book of life. So that's where we add that there. And then in the second blessing, which the second blessing is what is about Mechaya HaMesim, reviving the dead, we also add a line there. What do we add a line there? Micha Malcha Avarachaman, Zerchei Tzira L'chaim Barach B'M. You, who is like you, a merciful Father, who in compassion remembers his creatures in life. What do we say? We're about to say about everything that God says. If you go back to the previous paragraph, it says, he sustains living in loving kindness, resurrects the dead with great mercy, supports the falling, heals the sick, releases the bond, he fulfills his trust to those who sleep in the dust. So we say, by the way, God, remember us for life too. Right? So that's what we add now. Then where it really changes is the third blessing. The third blessing we usually say, Ata Kadosh, V'Shimcha Kadosh, U'Kdoshim M'chol Yom Yahalucha Sela, Baruch Ata Hashem Hakel HaKadosh. That's usually the whole blessing. On Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you want to see how long the blessing is? That one blessing, which is usually 2 lines. Look in page 110. That blessing goes this entire page and half of the next page till the second paragraph of page 111. So that blessing, which is usually a 2-line blessing, Ata Kadosh V'Shimcha Kadosh, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur becomes a 1.5-page blessing. So what is all this going on? What are we adding in here? So first of all, before I go to those additions, I want to take one more look. Turn to page 111. Let's see how the blessing ends up. Normally we say, Baruch Ata Hashem, Hakel HaKadosh. Blessed are you, Lord, the holy God, the holy, whatever. On Rosh Hashanah, what we say, Hamelech HaKadosh, the exalted or the holy king. On Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is the time when we crown God as our king. It's a day of Hachtaras HaMalchus, the day of crowning God as our king. Now what exactly does that mean? I'll explain it briefly. I've explained it many times in the past. It means that we are accepting upon ourselves the yoke of God being our king, of God being that our life is dependent and everything that God is about, and that we accept upon ourselves our Jewish faith for who we are and why God created us. And by the way, it's for the entire world. When we say the day of judgment, it's the day of judgment in the entire world. Why? Because what happens is, on each year, on Erev Rosh Hashana, the inspiration for the world, I'm just going to try and simplify very complicated Kabbalistic ideas in 2 minutes, which is really a class for itself. But the inspiration for the world, God's inspiration for the world, which Rosh Hashanah, what does Rosh Hashanah commemorate in history? Huh?
The New Year.
The New Year. But why is Rosh Hashanah the Jewish New Year?
Creation.
The day of creation, more specific? It's the day of creation of?
The world.
No. I mean, yes, but no. Of man. It's the day of creation of man. It's the 6th day of creation. The world's creation actually began on the 25th of Elul. Rosh Hashanah commemorates the day of creation of man. And why the creation of man? Because this is the day why is it man? Because man means that the purpose of creation is now on this day. In other words, you could have a world, but you need those to fulfill the mission and the purpose of the world. And so God created man, and this day, Rosh Hashanah, commemorates the creation of when man and women were created on this day,
Yeah, but
which is the sixth day of creation.
Are we supposed to fulfill the world or God?
God created the human being to fulfill God's purpose in this world. Now, God gave us a Torah, a mitzvah to tell us what that purpose is. One second. So when it comes each year, the year cycle goes around. Then it comes a moment where we say, okay, is this really happening? Take for example, if you have a dream house that you want to build, and the dream house is taking 3,000 years to build, and each year you come and see, how's it going? Is there any hope with this thing? And then each year it doesn't look like much is going on. And then you get upset and you talk to the contractor and say, come on, what's going on?
And he says in 2 weeks.
And he says in 2 weeks. and you start feeling a little down about the project. And suddenly the contractor shows you, and look what we're doing, look at this, look at that. And it's happening, and then you get re-inspired. In a certain way, that's sort of like what happens. God says, I created this world, this is my dream home. I created the human beings as my contractors. Go and put this beautiful project together. And we get a little slummy as the year goes on. It comes Rosh Hashana, and God says, okay, I don't know about this project. So we have to say, no, it's happening, God, it's happening. What do? We blow the shofar. We say, "Too." The shofar reawakes him. We're going to soon explain why the shofar specifically. If we have time, hopefully we'll get there. We blow the shofar, and the shofar says, "Okay, God, we're back. We're back to work." And so that's what happens at Rosh Hashana. The inspiration is lost, so to speak, right before Rosh Hashana, and that's re-inspired. So when we talk about God being our King, it's not just, God, you're our King, so give. It's about something more global. It's about something that's more universal. We're making we're making God's project on earth, and we are part. All of humanity is part of that, and we have to re-inspire that each year on Rosh Hashana, on the New Year, which is the creation of man, the day that God hired us, the day that God contracted us. And say, okay, the project is happening. We're on board. And that's what's happening on Rosh Hashanah. Yes, Monica, you had a question.
Well, the king's in the field, so field is a metaphor for the world, correct?
Right. Well, in a certain aspect, but yes. The field represents a certain aspect. There's a field, there's a desert, there's a city. Each one represents this different aspect.
But this happens every year around this.
The king in the field is during the month of Elul.
Say what?
The king in the field is during the month of Elul. During Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the king is in the palace. So it's a bit of a different message, but a similar idea. But the point is, so we are making God our king. Making God our king means we're accepting God's dominion, right? We're accepting God being the one that had created us, and God being our king. Whatever that means. A king means that you're taking on whatever the leadership of that king is about, you're accepting that. A king needs, it's not a dictator. A dictator forces his leadership. A king means that the nation is accepting him, right? Like King Charles. The nation, the Anglo nation is accepting King Charles as their king, and they make a big ceremony for it. So Rosh Hashanah is a ceremony. What do when they're making that ceremony? They're blowing the trumpets as he's coming in, right? Rosh Hashanah, we're blowing the trumpets. So therefore, we're turning this around a little bit, and instead of saying just the God, Hakel HaKadosh, referring to God as HaMelech HaKadosh. Now, with that being said, when we talk about God's holiness and dominion over the world, and this universal aspect, and we have to realize that when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, yes, it's the day of judgment as well. Day of judgment means God judges what's going to happen for each and every one of us for the coming year. But that's only part of the bigger picture of what's happening in Rosh Hashana. What's happening in the bigger picture of Rosh Hashana is that God is the king over the entire world. Not just my little petty needs. It's not to not say that those things are not important. They are, as we'll soon see. So therefore we add an additional prayer. So in Ata Kadosh, you are holy, your name is holy. What do we say? Through the generations, proclaim kingship. I'm back to page 110. The Dar Vadar Hamlichul Okel, Kihul V'Adam Aram Kadosh. Through the generations, proclaim the kingship of God, for He alone is exalted and holy. Then we add like this: Uvechein Yiskadesh Shimcha Hashem Elokeinu Al Yisro El Amecho. Now we say we want to sanctify God, and thus shall your name, Lord, be God, be sanctified upon Israel, your people, upon Jerusalem, your city. Then we say again, and so, Lord God, instill fear upon that you have made, and dread upon all those who have created, and the works and all the works will be awe in you. And then the next one, and so, Lord, grant honor to your people, glory to those who fear you. The next one, and then the righteous will see you and be glad, and the upright and the upright will rejoice. In other words, and then finally in page 111, Simlaich, and Lord your God, you alone shall reign over all your works. In other words, without going into detail of each one, the general idea here is we're looking at a universal picture, and we're saying there's something more that's happening during this time than just simply referring to God as we always do, Akel HaKadosh, the holy exalted king, the holy exalted God. We're referring to God as a king, and his dominion and the kingship is now over the entire world. Now, it's interesting to note that we say 4 times the word uvechein. You see that in Hebrew, uvechein? Uvechein. The beginning of each paragraph, uvechein. And thus shall. And so, translated and so. And so it shall be. Uvechein means and so it shall be. Uvechein.
Could you say that again in Hebrew?
Uvechein. Uvechein. Uvechein.
So it's
And so it shall be. Uvechein means and so it shall be. Which is a very unusual word to use in Hebrew. As a matter of fact, this word uvechein, and so it shall be, is only found 1 time in the entire Tanakh. Once this word is used in the entire Tanakh. Uvechein.
Where is it used?
I'm going to tell you. Where is this word used in the entire Tanakh, uvechein? It's a word that you hear every year, actually, but you only hear it twice a year. Because we read this twice a year in the story of Esther. Story of Esther. Where is it mentioned in the story of Esther? So what happens is like this. Mordechai comes to Esther and says that there's this horrible decree upon your people. And Esther says, I can't go. I can't go to the king. I haven't been there for 30 days, and who knows what he's going to do to me. And what does Mordechai tell her? Mordechai tells her, if you don't go, it's all over. And besides, he says, maybe this is your entire reason that you are created is for this moment. Maybe the entire reason that you became a queen is for this moment. And aside for that, if you don't go, you don't have a people to be part of anymore. So then Esther retorts back to Mordechai and says, Uvechein, and so it will be, Avo el HaMelech, I'm going to come to the king, Asher lo chadas, even wrong, even not according to the rules, even not according to the system. So she says, Uvechein, and so it will be, Avo el HaMelech, I will come to the king. So when it comes to our prayers, we adapt this word that Esther said in her most difficult moment, when she was making a life choice and saying, this is the very reason that I was created. This is the very reason why I ended up where I am. Uvechein, and so it will be. I'm going to go to the king. and I'm going to have my full trust that everything is going to work out for the best. We adapt this word from that one place in Tanakh, and we say, just like Esther went to the king, we're also going to the king. We're also going to the king. Yeah, maybe I haven't been here in the last 30 days, and maybe maybe the rule says if you haven't paid your dues in the synagogue, why have you not showed up yet? And where were you a whole year? And my neighbor sitting next to me is going to snark at me and say, I know you haven't been here since last Rosh Hashana. You only come twice a year. Still we say, Uvachein, and may it be, Avay al-Melech, I'm going to come to the king. I'm still going to come. And so this word, Uvachein, is adapted from that which Esther used. There's also other references. The fact that the Uvachein is also, if anybody likes gematria, which means numerical values, Uvachein is the gematria of Ana Hashem, which means please God. So also a numerical value. So this is used, and it's used one more time during the prayer. But this is the idea of this prayer over here. That we want to say that you have to understand, before we're even starting to get to our prayers, the prayers is not just about God give me. It's not just about I'm being judged. That's part of it. As a king, yes, part of it is being judged, but it's also, what is the message of Rosh Hashana? It's about proclaiming God's sanctity in the entire world. It's about recognizing, bringing godliness, bringing holiness into this world. That's why each and every one of us are created. Don't focus on, God, I need to make sure there's enough money in my bank account. Focus on, God, how do I fulfill your purpose of why you created me and why you brought me into this world? How do we bring about your ultimate goal in this world? That's what Rosh Hashana is about. They tell a story of a Cantonist. A Cantonist was children who unfortunately were taken away very young. They're Jewish children were taken into the army, into the Tsar's army. And what they would do is they literally would have a quota. From each community, you have to give us this many kids. And when a mother is sending away their kid, they knew they're never going to see that kid again. They're going to the army, that is a Tsarist kid, and they're not seeing that kid again. That kid doesn't know, in 10 years, that kid doesn't know where they came from, they don't know where their house is, they don't know nothing. They don't know anything about. And this happened, there were literally quotas from each community, and they had to decide. And then, unfortunately, a lot of times the more poor kids were sent or whatever. And so these kids, these Cantonists, and what happened was, a lot of them did stay true to their faith, and they and eventually they came back knowing that they're Jewish, but they knew nothing about what it means to be Jewish. So when they came back, in a lot of the communities, they say these are Russian soldiers. We don't want Russian soldiers praying with us. The communities are very uncomfortable. These guys, Russian soldiers, praying with us. It doesn't look right. So a lot of them had to make their own synagogues. They had Cantonist synagogues. Then sometimes they had their own traditions. They say one particular synagogue, at the end of Yom Kippur, they would take off their shirt. And they were taking off your shirt at the end of Yom Kippur. They would show the scars that they had from being whipped, from that they tried to force them to change their faith, and that's they said, if I'm born a Jew, this is who I am. And they literally had scars on their backs, and that's how they prayed at the end of Yom Kippur and the end of Ne'ilah. They took their shirts off, and that is how they ended Yom Kippur, saying, God, this is our scar. So one particular Cantonist, he comes into a synagogue. He says, what am I going to pray for? The previous Rebbe tells the story. He says, well, what am I going to pray for? So He says, family, I don't know where my family is. Food, clothing, whatever the Tsar gives me, that's what I have. He's not going to let me go out and work anyway. Whatever he gives me, that's what I have. That's what I live off of. The only thing I could pray for, he says, is Yiskadal v'yiskada shmei Rabba. What does it mean? It means, may your name be glorified and may your name be exalted. In other words, he's saying, all I can do is pray for you, God. Pray for you, God, that you should be great in this world. That's what's missing, he said, in our country. That God's greatness is missing in our country. That's the only thing that I could pray for. So this is what we're adding in Atah Kadosh, saying, know the importance, know the significance of the day, of what this day is all about, and that's what's added in this blessing. Okay, let's continue on. When we say Baruch Atah Hashem HaMelech HaKadosh, then the rest of the prayer sounds very similar to a regular holiday. We add the Yalav Yavo prayer, which is a prayer that's pretty much added in the middle blessing for every single holiday. And we mention the day. It's interesting that in our prayers we refer to page 112. We refer to Rosh Hashana in our prayers as Biyom Hazikaron Hazeh, the day of remembrance. In our prayers, Rosh Hashana is referred to as Day of Remembrance. By the way, nowhere in our prayers is Rosh Hashana referred to as Rosh Hashana. It's either referred to as the Day of Remembrance, the Day of Blowing. Biblically, it's referred to the Day of Blowing, Yom Teruah. But the day of Rosh Hashana, the New Year, is not referred to. And you know why it's not referred to as a New Year? Because biblically, it's not the New Year. Biblically, Rosh Hashana is not the New Year. Biblically, Rosh Hashana is the 7th month, not the New Year. The New Year is when?
Nisan.
Is Nisan, for Pesach. Pesach is the first holiday of the year, not Rosh Hashana. Now, we refer to it because of certain things it is referred to as the New Year. The Talmud refers to it as the New Year because it says there's 4 Rosh Hashanahs, but it's the New Year for certain things. But anyway, we don't find in our prayer referring to it as the New Year. It's the Yom HaZikaron Hazeh. And then, again, the blessing. So just like every holiday, we have a blessing. So we have also a blessing for this day, which is on page 112. And again, it refers to God, our fathers, reign over the entire world in your glory. You say, V'yeda kol pol kiata fialtoi. V'yeda kol pol kiata fialtoi. V'yavin kol yitzur kiata yitzartoi. What does this mean? May everything that has been made know that you have made it, and may everything that has been created understand that you have created it. And may everyone who has the breath of life in his nostrils declare that the Lord of God of Israel is king, and his kingship has dominion over all. And how is the day end? Baruch Atah Hashem, Melech al kol haaretz mekadesh Yisrael, v'yom hazikaron. Actually, this year we're going to say mekadesh hashabas v'Yisrael v'yom hazikaron. Bless the Shabbos and the day in Israel and the day of remembrance. That is the blessing. So as I said, in every holiday, Shabbos and Yontif, we have 3 blessings before, 3 blessings after, 1 in the middle. This is the middle blessing. Baruch Atah Hashem, Melech HaKol Aretz, Mekadesh Yisrael, V'yom HaZikaron. That's the middle blessing. And this is the Amidah, which is recited on both morning, evening, and afternoon. Then we do Modim, again, the thanks. In the thanks, we also add in a couple lines here and there. For example, on page 113, we throw in a line there, inscribe all the children of your covenant for a good life. And then page 114, where we ask about peace, the blessing for peace, we add, and in the book of life, blessing, peace, and prosperity, deliverance, consolation, and favorable decrees, May we and all your people, the house of Israel, be remembered and inscribed before you for a happy life and for peace. Blessed are you. Blesses his people Israel with peace. Now, when I'm looking at the time, I really want to be able to go through the Chazan's repetition. Because when it comes to the Chazan's repetition, there's a lot more. But I also have to get to Musaf. So I'm just going to show you just a few small things about this, and then I need to get to the Musaf prayer. Over here, it's broken up in two different days. So the first one is on page 115. I'm just going to tell you piece by piece outside what it is, and if you'd like, you could get a machzor and read through everything in detail. So the first thing in page 115. So again, it starts off like a regular, the blessing of Abraham, but in there. We add, there's a paragraph that's added. Misoit chachamim unevoinim umilamed as mevinim eftechafi b'sefilo v'sachanunim lecha lo yisu lecha nei pnei melech malchei amlachim v'adonei ha'adonim. This is a prayer for the Chazan. The Chazan recognizes that he has a big job. The big job of the Chazan is not that he needs to have a good voice and to sing beautiful and to get paid well and to get sent to the opera for the next year. That's not the job of the Chazan. The job of the Chazan is to be the leader of the congregation, and all the prayers of the congregation come through the Chazan. So therefore the Chazan says, this is a very challenging job. I have on my shoulders the burden of the entire congregation. So therefore he says, bottom page 115, I am awe-stricken as I open up my lips to utter words of prayer, as I rise to plead before the utmost awesome one. Few are my good deeds, therefore I tremble, I lack understanding. How then can I hope and pray? And basically he goes on saying that God, I'm really not worthy, but please accept my prayers on behalf of the congregation. So for those who like to follow along in Hebrew, you don't have to say this. This is a prayer for the Chazan. This is not for the whole congregation to say. And because of the awesomeness of the prayer, as you see, the ark is opened during this time. So if you want to know what's the first page, it's a prayer of the Chazan. Then, the next bunch of pages, 116, 117, 118, basically all the way until the bottom page 126. These are all hymns that are added into the prayers. Most of them come from a known hymnist. I don't know how you say it in Hebrew. I mean in English. How do you call it a hymn? Someone writes hymns.
We understand.
His name was Rabbi Elazar HaKalil. Rabbi Elazar HaKalil. He wrote many of the prayers. He wrote the Eicha. Right, Monica, you showed me you saying the Eicha. So he wrote the not the Eicha, the what's it called? The prayers that said on Tisha B'Av. He wrote many of those. The Kinnos, thank you, the Kinnos. And basically, these are formulated around three aspects of the day, which is what we're going to get to in a moment. What are the three aspects of the day? There's three aspects of the day. The first one is called Malchiot. Comes from the word Melech, which means what? King. The one aspect of the day is king. That is the idea of kingship, of making the monarchy of God, which is represented on the day of Rosh Hashana, Malchiot. The second aspect of the day, which we referenced before, the day of Rosh Hashana is Yom
Zikaron.
Yom HaZikaron. Thank you. By the way, that's also the blessing you make when you light candles on Rosh Hashana. Lahadlik ner shel yom hazikaron. It's the day of remembrance. Zikaron, day of remembrance. Why do we remember? Because we want God to remember all the good things in history. Look at the bigger picture, as a way to put it. Don't just, I know I messed up, but look at the greater history. Look at what we're all about. There's more to this than just my misdeeds. Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance. That's called Zichronot. And then finally, it's a day of, what else is the day of Rosh Hashanah about? One very important aspect of Rosh Hashanah. You're missing out the main thing of Rosh Hashanah. The shofar, exactly. Shofarot, the shofar. How can you forget? That is the mitzvah of the day. The mitzvah of the day. If you don't do anything on Rosh Hashanah, all you do is listen to the shofar, you did Rosh Hashanah. That's why in Chabad we have what we call shofar in the park. And go to the park and blow shofar. My sister, she lives in Nice, France. And it's beautiful. She lives right there on the Riviera. Rosh Hashanah in the afternoon, after they're done their prayers, they go to the beaches of the Riviera. There's thousands of Jews that hang out there, and they blow the shofar. Just dozens of times. They blow the shofar for everyone there to hear the shofar. These are people, a lot of them didn't go to synagogue, but they know in the afternoon, they come, they're special. They know in the afternoon of Rosh Hashanah, there's gonna be Chabad blowing the shofar on the beach of the Riviera. And that's what they do. They come to hear the shofar. I had an interesting story when we were in St. Martin, where we thought we may possibly move. We didn't end up in the end, but we did Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur services there. Also, it was on a beach. I don't want to go into details of the beach, but we went there to do tashlach, right, which is the water service. And while we were there was a young man walking, and he says, "What's going on?" And we said, "It's Rosh Hashanah today." He said, "I had no idea." He said, "I'm Jewish. I had no idea it's Rosh Hashanah today." He was fully dressed, by the way. And we said, "Well, did you hear the shofar?" No, he didn't hear the shofar. Of course not. So we blew the shofar for him, and he became very emotional. And he said, "Thank you so much for this." So we explained to him, by the way, today's the first day of Rosh Hashanah. There's still another day of Rosh Hashanah. And we told him the services are right here in this hotel. We're in a hotel doing the services. Sure enough, the next day he stayed. He came for the services. He was there an entire day. And he stayed throughout the entire service. So whatever happened to that Jew, I don't know. But I remember this one Jew. Who knows? It could be our entire stay there was for this one guy that we met. But anyway, so the idea, the mitzvah of the day is shofar. So if you don't do anything, the entire day is shofar. With that being said, this year we don't blow the shofar on the first day because it's Shabbos, which is a completely different discussion that I don't have time to get into now. But we don't blow shofar on Shabbos. Now if you take a look at all these hymns that are here, all these songs, they all reference one of these aspects. Either Malchiot, kingship, Zichronot, remembrance, or Shofar, the shofar. So if you look on page 118, and a lot of them talk about like the angels, how they praise God. You learn how God's greatness and God's monarchy and rulership over the entire world. On the bottom, you see the bottom, page 118, we hear, "Rise and sound the shofar and destroy every evildoer, whatever. King who delivers from evil." Then King, remember, right? So that you have these three things. The sound of the shofar, we mentioned our forefathers here. Each of these are connected in some way to these references. And so these are the songs over here. In our synagogue, we try to go through them relatively quickly. But the nice ones we sing, for example, on page 124. Hashem Elech, Hashem Alach, Hashem Loch L'Olam Va'ed. Lord is our King, the Lord was our King, the Lord shall be King forever and ever. We sing this, a beautiful tune. Adirei ayuma yadiru v'kol Hashem melech Beruei varak yivarechu v'kol Hashem malach yibarei goy vayagbiru v'kol Hashem yimloch Hashem melech Hashem malach Hashem yimloch li'olam v'ed. And what this is basically goes through is how the angels praise God and how we learn from them how to praise God. Then one more thing I want to point out, page 126. We don't ignore the fact that Rosh Hashana is a day of judgment, and that on the day of kingship, God is also judging all of His creations. That's part of being a king, is judging all His creations. And so we refer to this as the day of judgment. To Almighty who warrants judgment, to Him who probes hearts on the day of judgment, to Him who reveals hidden things in judgment. Levaychen levavais biyai mediyin legoy lamukais ba'adiyin. So we refer to this about what happens in the day of judgment, and we go through many different references and verses about the day of judgment. All of this is in the Chazan's prayer, which means that if you're not able to follow along, take your time, find one prayer that's meaningful, and spend time. It's not part of the obligatory Amidah prayer that you said. The Amidah prayer is the one that I showed to before. That's the private Amidah prayer. This is said by the Chazan on behalf of the congregation. If you can't keep up, find a prayer that's meaningful to you and just focus on that. Some people find this very meaningful about being the day of judgment, all the things that God does in reference to the day of judgment. Then is the end of the regular, what we would call repetition of the Amidah, beginning with the Kedusha. Nakdishach v'naritzach, we do the Kedusha just like we do in every Shabbos. And then the rest is just what we would call the regular repetition of the Amidah. The rest of these pages, from page 127 until page 132, is the exact Amidah prayer that we said, just repeated by the Chazan. So in other words, half of this these scary glob of pages is just a repetition of the Amidah. Just happens to be the Amidah is a little bit longer than usual, but a lot of it is just repetition, and the rest of it is hymns and songs that are added in by the Chazan on behalf of the congregation. And if you know them, sing along, and if not, then find a prayer that's meaningful, that talks to you. See something that that you could relate to, and focus on that prayer. These aren't obligatory prayers. They're added in order to, add inspiration to the holiness of the day, if you will. And the same thing in the second day, 132, it's very similar to the first day. Okay, now, page 152. In other words, what I just showed you is a lot of these pages, first of all, some of them are only for day 1, some of them are only for day 2. So don't be scared that we're flipping a lot of pages. Some of them are not all for each day. But again, so just what you have to understand in the breakup of this repetition, which always sounds relatively long, there's two parts. The first part is just added songs and hymns that are for the Chazan to put into his prayers to try and bring more of the awe of the day. And the second half is the repetition of the Amidah. Okay, page 152. This is the Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu is a prayer that is a very old prayer, but the one that we know of this prayer from is from Rabbi Akiva. We all heard of the great Rabbi Akiva, the great sage Rabbi Akiva, to 24,000 students. What happened was there was a drought in the land of Israel for many, many months, and they didn't know what to do about this drought. They fasted and it didn't work, and they prayed and it didn't work. Finally, Rabbi Akiva got up and he said the prayer, Avinu Malkeinu, Ein Lanu Melech Ala Ata. Our Father, our King, we have no king but you. Avinu Malkeinu, Asei Imanu L'man Shemecha. Father, our King, for us, for the sake, act benevolently for us for the sake of your name. When Rabbi Akiva said this prayer, Avinu Malkeinu, it began to rain. And this prayer has been adapted, which is said, and there's many different aspects of the Avinu Malkeinu. We talk about, now part of it is, some parts of Avinu Malkeinu ask for our needs, beseech you, do not turn away empty-handed. We ask for health for some, which is basically because a lot of Avinu Malkeinu is asking for our needs. We don't say this on Shabbos. So as you see, on Shabbat Avinu Malkeinu is not said. So the first day we are not going to say Avinu Malkeinu because it's on Shabbos, because a lot of it is asking for our needs. You ask, send the complete healing to the sick. Rend evil verdict decreed against us. So because of part of it is asking for our needs, we don't say Avinu Malkeinu on Shabbos. But this is a very special prayer. It's recited. On Yom Kippur as well, we don't say it even if it's on Shabbos, except for Ne'ilah. The one time that we add it is in Ne'ilah. Now we do the after this, just like every Shabbos, after Shachris, we go to the Torah reading. We do the Torah reading on Rosh Hashana. Just go through this briefly. There's 2 readings for Rosh Hashana. Page 164 is the reading for Rosh Hashana. The first day of Rosh Hashana, we read the story of the birth of Isaac. Because we say that Rosh Hashana is a day that the prayers of Sarah were answered and she was given a son. She begot a son, Isaac, on the day of Rosh Hashana. And the second day, we read about the story of the binding of Isaac. And that's in connection with the ram that came after the binding of Isaac, where there was a ram that came about, and we blow the shofar ram. Why? Again, this is also about going to what we said before, that Rosh Hashanah being a day of remembrance, we invoke our forefathers and mothers and the holiness of these and the special things that they did and the great deeds that they did. And so part of that is bringing that in the Torah reading as well. So the first day of reading is about the birth of Isaac, and the second day reading is about the binding of Isaac. In a similar vein, the Haftarah, page 170. The first day Haftarah is a very moving Haftarah. It's about a great Jewish woman. Her name was Chana. Chana, you heard of Chana? Chana was the mother of? Who is the Chana the mother of? That's right. You're getting close. You're getting warm. The prophet Samuel, the prophet Shmuel. Right. The prophet Samuel was, and we say that Chana's prayers were answered on Rosh Hashana, and Samuel was born Rosh Hashana. And it's about, again, Chana who didn't have children. It's interesting, both the Torah reading and the Haftarah are about women who had difficulty having children and were answered on Rosh Hashana. She wasn't able to have children, and she went to pray. And another reason that we read this is because it also teaches us how to pray. And interesting that we learn a lot of laws of prayer. We learn them from Chana, from a woman, from Chana, about how to properly pray. And Eli, the high priest, said, "What are you doing? Why are you acting so strangely?" And she said, "I'm praying to God for a son." And sure enough, the next year she had a son, and she dedicated him to the temple, and that was the prophet Samuel, the prophet Shmuel. So we read the story of Chana, who was answered on Rosh Hashanah. We read her story. The second day of Rosh Hashanah is from the prophet Jeremiah, which was at a time that was very difficult for the Jewish people when they were being led into exile. And we talk about how they went out. Some of these verses are read in the Musaf of Rosh Hashana as well, because it talks about following the way that God gave us, even though it was difficult, and even though who wants to go into exile, but we listened and we did as God said. But one of the reasons that we listen to why we read this also is because it talks about another great Jewish woman, Rachel. Rachel mevaka al baneha. Rachel is crying, weeping for her children, and again, this is invoking some of our great fathers and mothers of the past, that we say, just like Rachel cried for her children back then, we ask that Rachel should cry for us now as well, and beseech on our behalf on the day of Rosh Hashana. When I was in Israel a few months ago, I went to visit the tomb of Rachel. Those who here was on the trip? Anyone here? No one here was on the trip. Oh yeah, Jackie was. But she didn't want to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go, so she didn't go. So I had to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning because it wasn't part of the actual trip. It was an addition. But that was a very meaningful part of the trip to go to Rachel's tomb, which is on the road to Bethlehem. Very a place that's not the safest place to visit. That's why it's literally surrounded by these huge walls. It's sad to have to see a tomb like Rachel like that, but nevertheless. Anyway, let's go on. Page 175. Right after we read the Torah, before the Torahs are returned to the ark, we blow the shofar. And again, I will point out that this will only be done the second day of Rosh Hashana. 175, 176 is the blowing of the shofar. I'm not going to go into detail about the blowing of the shofar, just simply because I don't have time. We're going to go now to Musaf. The Musaf begins right after the blowing of the shofar. The Torah is returned to the ark. And on the bottom, page 178, again the Chazan says a special prayer. Hineni ani mimas nirash v'nifchad mipachad yoshev tilois Yisrael. What does he say? He says, "Here I am, deficient in meritorious deeds, trembling and awe-stricken from the fear of the one who enthroned upon the praises of Israel." Basically, again, the Chazan is saying, "Look, I'm not perfect, but I have this job to sing on behalf of the congregation." You know, just to think about what the words actually mean, and then you imagine, some big synagogue in Manhattan or whatever, and you have a Chazan singing this, and you have a whole choir in the background. Oh, stop for a moment. What are you saying? Think about what you're saying. You're saying, God, I'm not worthy of this at all, but still accept my prayers on behalf of the congregation. So therefore, let me sing let me sing an opera to God, I'm not worthy, right? God, I'm not worthy, right? That's basically what he's saying. It's just kind of funny if you think about it in that way. But this is a big, Chazan. Yassila Rosenblatt, there's a famous song how he used to sing this. Anyway, and then he says, Yadaiti Hashem ki tzedek mishpatecha ve'emunah inisani. And then there's a tune that we sing that dates back to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. Goes la 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 ya la la ya 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 ay 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 Yiskadal V'yiskada Shemei Rabbo. They sing B'chayeichonu v'yamecha v'chayei d'chol Beis Yisrael Pagolo Bisman Karivi Meru. Amen. So that's the tune for the Kaddish of Musaf of Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur.
What does Musaf mean?
Musaf means addition.
Addition?
Addition and added, because every day we say 3 prayers, morning, afternoon, and evening, representing the sacrifices that were brought morning, afternoon, and evening. When it came a holiday or Rosh Chodesh, there was an added sacrifice that was brought. And corresponding to that added sacrifice, we say an added prayer. And we reference in the prayer those additional sacrifices. So now Musaf for Rosh Hashana, I'm sorry to break the news to you, Musaf Rosh Hashana is the longest prayer, the longest Amidah prayer of the entire year. Even longer than Yom Kippur. Now that is for the personal. When I say the Amidah, I mean the personal Amidah. I'm not Gesundheit. I'm not referring to the Chazin's Amidah. And the reason for that is as follows. We said before there are 3 aspects of Rosh Hashana. What are the 3 aspects of Rosh Hashana? Kingship, good. Malchiot. What was the second one? Zichronot, remembrance, and shofar. These 3 things, Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofrot, our sages instituted that we should, number 1, say 10 verses from Tanakh that talk about these individually, each of these things. 10 verses from Tanakh that reference these things. And after we say these 10 verses, we should say a blessing referring to each one of these aspects. And after that, to do what? To blow the shofar. Now again, Shabbos, we're not going to do that. On Sunday, God willing, yes. So let's take a look. The Amidah on page 180 is basically the exact same thing as Shacharis. We have the Vachains on page 181. It's almost verbatim. Then page 182, it's very similar to any holiday musaf, where we basically add in the additional sacrifices of the day. So page 183, when it comes Shabbos musaf, we add in about the sacrifices for Shabbos. On the day of Shabbat, 2 yearlings, male lambs without blemish, whatever, those are the sacrifices for Shabbos, the wine offering, the fine wine. And then we add in the 7th month, you see, in the biblical terms, it's the 7th month. On the 1st day of the month, you shall have a holy assembly, you shall do not work or labor. This is a quote verbatim from the Torah. It shall be the day of blowing the shofar, you shall prepare a burnt offering for a pleasing odor to the Lord, 1 young bullock, 1 ram, 7 yearling lambs without blemish. And our meal offering, and we go on, we read what is the offering of the day, what is the musaf offering of the day. This is done every holiday. Every holiday, when we say a musaf prayer, we add in what is the additional offerings of that day. And if it's Shabbos, we add what's Shabbos as well.
Who's going to bring all those animals?
I don't know. I'm not a Kohen. I'm not going to worry about it. You can ask Yitzchak. He's a Kohen. Ask him how he's ready to do that. Obviously, today we don't have a base of Mikdash. We don't have a temple, so this is in place of that. We talked about that at length in our first course about the prayers today being in place of the sacrifices. But we still reference them to know that this is where this is what we're praying for. In place of the additional sacrifice that was brought. So we talk about what was additional sacrifice that was brought in Rosh Hashana. This, as I said, is relatively the same of any holiday musaf prayer. This is basically what a holiday musaf prayer looks like. And the first blessing we say, we don't have a holy temple. God, please bring us back the holy temple. But until then, we have our sacrifice. We're going to speak about. We're going to read about the sacrifice. Then on page 184, we add an addition for Shabbos. Yismechu b'malchusecha shomrei 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 Shabbat. That's an addition for Shabbat. Then comes the lovely part. We start by saying Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol. Now what the heck is Aleinu doing in the middle of our Musaf Amidah? Aleinu, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at the end. So the story they say is that Aleinu came and complained to God and said, God, what's this? You put me all the way at the end of the prayer. People's prayer books are already closed. They're halfway out the door. God says, you know what? I'm going to put you right smack in the middle of the Amidah on Rosh Hashana, Yom Kippur. Everyone's going to say you. Even those that don't usually come to synagogue, everyone's going to have to say the Aleinu prayer. Okay, but the real reason that we say Aleinu is because Aleinu is the beginning of the first 10 verses associated with Malchiot. Because what is Aleinu all about? V'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. We bend our knee, bow down, and offer praise before the supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, who stretches forth the heaven and establishes the earth. And basically, what does it talk about? And therefore we hope to you, Lord our God, that we speedily behold the splendor of your might, to banish whatever. Then we say, to a perfect world under the sovereignty of the Almighty. All mankind shall invoke your name. Right? This is what Rosh Hashana is about. It's about the God's kingship over the entire world. And notice say, V'ne'emar v'hoya Hashem l'melech al kol haaretz. No, we don't say that. Ki amalchu shalchi la'antil mich l'chavad kakos u'b'sar asacha Hashem yimloch li'olam va'ed. May God reign forever and ever. So that's the first verse of the 10 verses of kingship. May God reign forever and ever. Verse number 1. Then,
How did they split them up?
it has to be 3, I'll tell you. It has to be 3 from Chumash, from Torah, 3 from Nach, from the prophets, and 3 from Ketuvim, from the writings. So Tanakh is split up into 3, 3, 3, 3. Then you have one extra one, which could be from any of them. So on page 185, it continues on. The next verse we have is from Numbers. The Lord is king within him. The love of the king is in him. Then we have Ahi Bishur Melech, which is from Deuteronomy. He became king of Shurun, and the heads of the people assembled. The tribes of Israel were united. Then we have a verse from Psalms. I'm not going to go through all the verses, but basically we have here 10 verses, and then the final verse, the 10th one, the 10th one is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is a God, the Lord is one. So if you wonder why middle of Shemona Esrei, middle of Amidah, we start saying Shema, you say, one second, what's Shema doing here? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What's Shema doing in the middle of the Amidah prayer? The answer is that this is the 10th verse associated with God's kingship. So this was chosen Shema. Then we go to the blessing, which is the same blessing that was recited in Shachris, which ends off on page 186, Baruch Atah Hashem, Melech al kol haaretz mekadesh Yisrael, king over the whole world, to sanctify the Shabbat, Israel, and the day of remembrance. And then we blow the shofar. Then we go to the next set of verses. How does it start? Page 186. Ata zocher masei olam ufakeid kol yitzuri kedem. He remembers the deeds performed in the world and recalls all that was created in the days of yore. And then we go through many verses. We remember many interesting things that are referenced here. For example, Noah. Noah is mentioned here. The fact that God remembered Noah in the flood. The fact that God remembered the Jewish people, God remembered the people in Egypt, the Jewish people in Egypt. God remembers his covenant. We talk about the prophets. One of the prophets is what we talked about in Haftarah before, God remembering his people as he was taking them out into exile. And then in the blessing, page 188, God, our fathers, remember us with a favorable remembrance before you, and be mindful of us with a decree of deliverance and mercy. Remember on our behalf, Lord of God, the covenant, kindness, and vow which you swore to Abraham, our father, Mount Moriah. We'll go on again, say, God, remember us. Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you, Lord, Zochar Habris, who remembers the covenant. And so this is all about remembrance, Zochar. Then again, the shofar is blown. Now, what does remembrance have to do with the shofar? What does Malchi have to do with the shofar?
Rabbi, if we go all the way to 249, the very end,
No, I'm going to show you in a minute. Then 189. This is the third. These are all verses that have to do with shofar. You can actually see the word shofar in the English is in italics, so you can see how many times the shofar is mentioned over here. And again, these are 10 verses from Tanakh, which reference the shofar in many different ways. For example, one is talking by Mount Sinai. By shofar, holich v'chazek me'od. By Mount Sinai, there was a sound of the shofar. We'll talk about that verse. All Elikim Yisra Hashem kol shofar. May God be elevated with the sound of the shofar. One of the verses is the last verse of Tehillim. Hallelujah, hallelujah, b'kadsha, hallelujah, b'kiya uza, hallelujah, b'gvurasav, hallelujah, k'rav good Lord. So they say hallelujah, b'seika shofar, hallelujah, b'neil v'chinar. Right? Praise you with the sound of the shofar. So remember there. So again, these are 10 verses that are about shofar. And then we say one more from the Torah. V'yam simchastam ma'edichem. Rejoicing in festivals. Again, we refer to shofar. Then the blessing ends off, page 190 on the bottom. Baruch atah Hashem, Shamea kol truas ami Yisrael barachmim. Blessed are you, Lord, who hears the sound of teruah of his people Israel in mercy. So this is verses about the shofar, and then we sound the shofar. And then that is essentially where the prayer ends. You say the last three blessings were changed, the same last three blessings, just like any other prayer, and that's where it ends. Okay? Now, what really takes time, yeah?
Here it says, just a question, that we dance around and string instruments and flute, but we're not allowed to play any of the instruments during Rosh Hashana. Are we?
Those instruments that's referred to are instruments that was what are you talking about?
On 189.
Oh, that's from Book of Psalms. It's not talking about Rosh Hashana specifically. It just refers to the shofar. It's talking about praising God. One of the ways it talks about praising God is with the shofar. So we reference the shofar, so we bring a verse about shofar. Then the next from page 193 until page 240, these are all the Chazan's repetition. And it's split up into day 1 and 2. So we only have 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to go through a few things about the Chazan's repetition. Again, it's the same thing as Shachar's, which is a lot of these are additional added songs and hymns. It's not necessarily part of the prayer per se, but they're added in. One of the most famous ones is page 200. In the Sana Taikif Kedushas Hayom. Let us proclaim the mighty holiness of the day, for it's awe-inspiring and fearsome. Therefore your kingship is exalted, your throne is established with love and kindness. Then we say, Rosh Hashana Yikasevun, and the second paragraph. In Rosh Hashana they are inscribed, and fasting Yom Kippur they are sealed. This is where the idea comes from, Rosh Hashana being inscribed, and Yom Kippur being sealed. How many shall pass away, how many shall be born? Who shall live, who shall die, who shall live at his allotted time, who shall depart before his time, who shall perish by war or by fire. This is a very moving prayer, because it talks about Rosh Hashana being a day of judgment, and that everything is decided on Rosh Hashana, and everything that happens throughout the entire year is decided on Rosh Hashana. And this is what we talk about. But then we end off, Useshuva, Usefilo, Tzedakah, but repentance, prayer, and charity, Ma'avir, and Sarah, Xer, they avert the severity of decree. So by doing tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, repentance, prayer, and charity, we could avert the decree. Okay? So this is the Nisana Taikev prayer. There's some tradition of where the prayer comes from. Some say it comes from Amnon of mine, some say it comes before him. But anyway, these are just different prayers that are added in. And we do open the ark again, just like by Shacharis for some of these prayers. But then, once we say the Kedusha, which is on page 201, most of it is repetition. There's one more prayer on page 203. This is a prayer of V'chol Ma'aminim, and all believe. It's also a very interesting prayer. He holds his hand attribute of judgment. We talk about the fact that on Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur is a day that all believe. And all believe that he's a faithful guy who probes and searches hidden secrets. And all believe that he probes man's thoughts. And all believe, we say, and all believe. Many, many times say, and all believe. V'chol ma'aminim. And this, on Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur, we recognize that everyone believes ultimately. That's why you see on Rosh Hashana, you see that guy that never comes to shul a whole year. You want to know why he's coming to shul? Because of this prayer. V'chol ma'aminim. Because all believe. No matter who it is, you all believe. Anyway, then if you look on the prayers, most of it is basically a repetition, which is why it seems like it's very long, and it is. But literally, this is all a repetition of the previous prayer. And we blow the shofar again 3 times during the Chazan's repetition. So that's why it takes so long. Yeah.
What is the logic behind repetition? The fact that way back when many of the congregations were illiterate.
Right.
So the cousin would repeat it so they could understand.
Right.
But today we're literate, so why are we so hung up with repetition?
So first of all, it's actually brought down that on Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur, because of that, actually you cannot fulfill your obligation with the Chazan. Because there's so many added hymns, it's impossible to keep your concentration. The answer is, number one, first of all, not everyone's literate. Just because someone is coming to shul doesn't mean that they're literate. There's plenty of people who can't read Hebrew, and the Chazan is praying on their behalf. And there's a lot of people that don't show up to synagogue at all, and he's praying for those people as well. And as far as the fact that there are more literate people today, yeah, that is true. But once a tradition is established, then that's the way it was. But the truth is, it's still very much necessary. How many people have come to shul? At least maybe in a more orthodox community. So there's some communities where they do something called a kurza. They do a shortened version. But once something is established as tradition, we're not going to start changing it. So essentially, this is what the prayer is. Then we have the Birchat Kohanim, the priestly blessing, and at the very end, after the priestly blessing, and then with blessing of Shalom, blessing of peace. At the end of the blessing of peace, we sing a song on page 220, Hayom Tamtzenu. On this day, strengthen us. On this day, bless us. On this day, exalt us. And that's where it ends. That's what it is. By the way, the second day of Rosh Hashana, the Musaf of Rosh Hashana, there's only one added hymn. There's only two additional prayers. So the second day of Rosh Hashana, the Musaf is significantly shorter. Take a look in 221. 222, we add what we said on the first day, the day of judgment, right? He who probes hearts on the day of judgment. We add that, which is the first day we said in Shacharis. We add that in Musaf. Then in the Sanataykev prayer, which is said on page 223. That's it. Nothing else is added. Chol Ma'aminim. That's it. There's no other additional hymns that are said in the second day of Rosh Hashana. So significantly a shorter prayer in the second day of Rosh Hashana. But this is what the prayers are, my friends. Any questions? Next week, we'll talk about the Yom Kippur prayer book. There's a lot to talk about in the Yom Kippur prayer book. Thank you for joining us online, whoever did.